John McCormack, very welcome to Talking Sport with Stan. Pleasure to have you on, John.
Thanks very much, Stan. Pleasure to be here.
Great. Really appreciate you taking the time out now. Looking forward to the chat. Fellow club man, but no relation now. I must stress that. I've been asked that a lot over the years. What's Speedy to you, or what are you to Speedy? And so no relation at all. No connection, funny enough.
Well, that's interesting, because when you were winning a Division 4 or Division 3 title final with Longford over the years, I got a text from a friend at work who said, is that Sean McCormack anything to you? And I said, unfortunately not. But he said, I don't care. I'm going to tell everybody that you are. So it went around DSB that you were my son at the time.
It's gas. It's gas, actually, the amount of times you'd be, especially in a parish like Killoe, where a lot of most, surnames are connected in some way, shape or form, or there'd be some connection made somewhere, but no.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. So all good with you anyway.
All is great. Thanks for the call, Jay.
You missing the sport?
A little bit. Well, we have the Premier League back now, so that's a start.
Yeah, I was actually in the last man standing there myself. I had Norwich last night, so didn't go too well for me. Gone out of it now.
Yeah, well, that's where my daughter is living, so
yeah,
they weren't too happy with the result last night either.
I should have touched images before I went with them. I was gone completely out of touch with it, because you'd be keeping an eye on it beforehand, and then form goes out the window, obviously, with the last few months. But
yeah, and then with some teams have really nothing to play for, so you don't know how they're going to select them or anything. Yeah,
exactly. Cool.
Yeah.
Right, John, we'll go through your accolades first. We'll start with the Gaelic football. Obviously, the famous club championships we're both aware of. Schoolboy in 1969. Just when I seen the Schoolboy in 1969, who managed you that time, or who was principal, or who was the head honcho?
As far as I know, Brendan Bracken would have been one of the men over the team. I would have been very young, basically a hanger-on with that Schoolboy team, whom I suppose Billy Bratton, for instance, would have been one of the star players in that team. And I often joked with him that he was my first hero, because he lived in the K, as we call it, down in Kiltyreer, so.
You're not too far from him.
Not too far from him at all, no. But he would have been doing all the scoring and that sort of stuff from my memory of it. So,
oh, man, Billy.
So, he would have been on that team now. Frankie Tor, a few like that.
Yeah, I just when I seen it, I was curious, Minor 1978, minor 9-a-side, under 21 79. Your senior championships 88, 93, 95, as we alluded to. Leader Cup 85, 86. Division 1 League in 1985, Intermediate Championship in 1977, Intermediate Leagues in 76 and 77, Senior B Championship in 1983, the Recline Tournament, and your Man of the Match Award in the County Final 93. Okay, so we move on to the county accolades. It's a great picture, actually, you sent me on. I was trying to make out a few heads on it, a few very familiar ones. Your Father Manning Cup in 1976, National League Division 3 and 4 medals in 88, 90 and 84. 3 Footballer of the Years in Longford Gaelic Star Awards in 84, 85 and 86. GAA Player of the Year in Longford VEC 93. And Offaly Sevens in 1984.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
Okay, nationally. Railway Cup medal in 1988, member of 2 Railway Cup squads in 84 and 88, trained with the International Rules squad in 84 and 86, Masters All-Ireland 2000s, and All-Ireland Interfirms at the ESB in 85, Rest of Ireland team versus Kerry in 1984, in which he scored 1-3, 2 All-Star nominations in 83 and 85, and the Longford Sevens win in Island Bridge. And then to wrap up, your other codes in athletics: community games, county gold medal, marathon under 17, cross country gold medal, and your soccer underage player of the year, Longford Town 1975, member of the Longford district team twice, Paddy Clabby Cup in 1985, and then with the rugby Midland League under 17 medal 1976 and 77, and Floodlit Sevens in 1994. Some array of accolades there. I asked this question a lot when I put the question to you about getting your accolades together. How easy was it? How accessible were it?
I would have found it very difficult, because as I've said before, I tend to leave things in the past and move on pretty quickly because I don't see the point in dwelling on something that's happened and you can't change. So
Mm.
I found it really difficult, to be honest with you, to find stuff. And right up to the last minute, something would come into my head then when I started thinking about it, because it's like everything else. When you find one thing, it relates to something else, or it triggers a memory, and then you go looking and see, did I win that, or did I actually do that, or did that happen at all, or was I dreaming the dream, as they say? So yeah, it was surprisingly hard, I suppose, at the start. But it kind of fell into place then once I got into the groove and found stuff in boxes and drawers and out in the garage and things like that. Yeah, so it all helped. Yeah, so I kind of pulled it together. It looks pretty good on paper. I don't know whether it was worth all the effort in the end, but
Oh, I'm sure it was. Sure.
it's
You must get,
interesting.
you must get a great sense, though. You look back and you see all the achievements. Like there must be great joy in it as well. I know you're saying like it was difficult to piece them all together, but it's. I'm sure at this point now, as we're chatting, it's probably nice to look back and a very, very illustrious career.
Yeah, I suppose it is, but like sometimes what you remember, I suppose, the things you failed at or you didn't manage to achieve or win as a team or an individual. So I suppose you have to look at it with a lot of pride because you put an awful lot of time into it, as you would well know. And maybe when you list out everything, you can say, God, yeah, that was good fun, or I enjoyed that, or well, I wouldn't say enjoy because I don't think you enjoy anything when you're playing in it. You might enjoy the result afterwards, but there's nothing massively. Everything is such a struggle when, particularly if you're come from Killoe at that time, who would really have won nothing in underage or anything on the way up. So I suppose in a way you were at the start of something that has manifested itself now in a very successful senior club, good pitch, good people, everything like that. Yeah. So
Did that stand to you in your career, that lack of underage success, do you think?
I suppose I didn't pass too much remarks at the time because I wouldn't have known any history of what was won or not won. So I was quite lucky to get involved with the school boys, even though I wouldn't have played much in '69. But it kind of gave you, I suppose, a focus on something you can be successful at this crack, So
yeah.
And then you need a good set of players coming along because no individual will do it on their own, as much as you like to think you could, but you can't. So I suppose I was lucky. And then with the minor club being founded around '76 or that gave us a greater focus because we were kind of separate from the senior then. So you were focusing on your own age group, on your own thing. And you probably had a better input into how things would be done or not done, as the case may be.
Yeah. It's really remarkable, and I had a chat with Desi Barry the other day as well, and it's a really very unique thing to be able to talk about accolades on a club scale, a county scale, and also a national scale. Like that is something I'm sure you're very proud of because there's not too many that can have that conversation.
Well, obviously you would be when you look back, but I suppose I wouldn't have been probably the most confident individual at that particular time. So you're always wondering, do I deserve to be part of this panel, or should I be here at all, or am I just in it, to make up the numbers? But when you went training with these lads, you found out that, well, I'm definitely as fit as them. So that's a start, because for years, I think it was a certain period in Longford football where the teams were deemed never to be fit enough, which might be a catch-all for not being good enough, but there you go. So when you started mixing with players from other counties and started talking to them about stuff, you found out that we're really going about it the right way. Now, whether you ever got the right result, that's another thing. But obviously, yeah, it's fantastic, really, when you think about it. When you settle down and think about it realistically, it's great.
Yeah, and it's really like from my perspective, it's really, really interesting just to learn about the goings on at that time, how they come about and the whole experience of it. It's very interesting, especially at that time, because it seemed to be a really professional setup too for its era.
Yeah, we would have trained, basically we would have trained 3-4 times a week when I started playing with Longford, and you always trained on a Saturday, whether whether it would be hard if there was no game. And then you'd have to go back to your club maybe on a Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon and play. So basically we would have been training 5-6 times a week, I suppose, if there was no games on. So I couldn't complain about the attitude or anything like that. Like, it was a bit of an eye opener, but because I'd be involved in different sports, I didn't mind going out and playing. I'd play 3 or 4 games at the weekend, no bother. I just wanted to play,
And that was very common, wasn't it?
Oh, it would have been, yeah, absolutely. It would be nothing new for players to play a junior match, say with Killoe at 2:00 and play with the senior team at 4, that sort of way.
Yeah.
Cross over there or play a minor match before a senior game, and you could end up being brought on in the senior game. So yeah, it'd be pretty full on, all right, at that time.
I don't envy that era where you were saying that teams in Longford weren't deemed fit enough, because the solution to that isn't always pretty.
No, it's not. And the fitness aspect, I've always said, is totally overrated, because I have never seen a team lose a game because they weren't fit enough. Not in an important game. Maybe at the start of the year, some counties or clubs might be taking it a bit handy because maybe they couldn't get their players together with working away at that time. Like, travel wouldn't be easy. So that's why the focus would come in on the championship. So I think, honestly, I think sometimes all the running around is like, you're like a middle distance runner, really, or a 200-meter sprinter. If you look at what they do in their training, a lot of county players are doing way more than that, and they're not even near Olympic standards. So you really have to wonder sometimes,
Oh, yeah, you would. I remember actually Jerry Kiernan, the famous runner, came out one time and he made a statement that GAA Gaelic teams weren't fit enough, But it was a very, it was a bold enough statement, because you can't compare his line of running to the run that goes on in the game of Gaelic football. Like, it's completely different. There's intensity levels, there's different zones. It's a ridiculous comparison, really.
It was, but I think I remember when he made it, I thought he was kind of talking about the amount of times they train, and that, like, I suppose a middle distance runner would do savage miles in the week, but I'm not sure that a Gaelic footballer would do that amount of miles. He might train more intensely over a shorter distance or period. I think that's what he was angling at, and
it can be blown out of proportion.
I think the GPA might have been stirring for more money at that time as well, so he'd be trying to get his beat in for the athletics. I think.
That's true. I remember a few of us were joking, actually, saying we should throw him into a tackling square and see how his perspective changes.
The good old tackling square, huh? What a piece of machinery that is.
Oh, quit. Four cones and and the wrong clientele in there with you.
Yeah. The one who isn't interested in the ball at all. He doesn't
even know
thinks he's in a cage. Thinks he's McGregor. Huh?
Wants nothing to do with it. So come here, tell me how it all started for you, John, from a young age. Your exposure to different sports, I suppose. Like, it is clear you obviously played athletics, you played a bit of soccer. Was the GAA big in your household growing up?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I suppose it would have become a big thing because we lived in England for a few years. So when we got back here, it would have been in the late 60s. So Longford would have been going good. And at that stage, obviously with them being successful, everybody was traveling to the matches. And games would be live on the radio as well. So I suppose from there, then you were brought to the local Cully fad. So from there on in, you just grew into it without being pushed in any shape or form. That was your day out on a Sunday. So I, like everybody else, would have loved that Longford team. Like, Jackie Devine would have been my hero of that. And I suppose from a young age, I'd set me sights on the number 10 jersey, and I was prepared to do almost anything to get a game with Longford and say, well, now I'm a county player. Because, as I said, we all remember the old houses where you had a picture of the Pope and you had President Kennedy, but you had the Longford football team was right up there as well. So they would have been one of the holy trinity out the country in Longford for sure.
That's brilliant to hear that. Like, you'd love for that to still be the case nowadays, that there'd still be that ambition amongst youngsters to strive on and get into the blue and gold at some stage, you know.
Yeah, well, as I said, that became my goal, because even when you'd go into the neighbours' houses, like when you're a young lad going around, and you'd be asked, and who's that fella there? Oh, that's Jackie Devine or Bobby Burns or, John Heenan or whoever. Like, sure, we could nearly, even now, I think I could nearly remember the whole team, because they were just gods at that time. As I said, they were right up there with President Kennedy, so that's saying something.
Yeah, we all had a team we could relate to, and
Yeah. Well, then I suppose there was no other competitive sports on radio or television really that I can remember. Match of the day maybe, or Wednesday night sports night or something like that. That was the only time you'd really see into other stuff. So yeah.
So was it your father, John, that would have brought you to the matches?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well,
Well,
he claimed he could play football. Unfortunately, I saw no evidence of that at any stage. So
you're going
we'll have to go along with the myth that he could play a little bit.
Well, given your talent now, I'm sure he played a bit for sure. And come here, what was it about Jackie Devine what did you like about his style of play, or what was it why did Jackie stand out to you?
Well, it's an odd thing that I don't know. It's just he seemed a highly skilled player in what could be a mix and match sort of a game, where a long kicking would have been traditional, but he seemed to be able to just get his head up and pick a man or continue his runs on, because as I remember at that time, players didn't wander too much. Like, you wouldn't find the number 10 down beside the number 3 in the full back line. That never seemed, from what I saw or remember, that never really happened. There was very traditional one-on-one. So Jackie Devine wouldn't have been the biggest or the heaviest or anything like that, but his absolute skill, as far as I was concerned, that's what probably attracted me to him. Plus, the name Devine would be not too bad if you want to be a good footballer. Like, there's lots of headlines there as well. So I'm presuming I remember the headline, Jackie was divine, for sure. That sticks out in my mind now that we're talking.
I said there was some fun with that headline when they're sitting down there, so their options were limitless.
Yeah, it's right. So yeah, as I said, I just got attracted to him and his style, and that was it. Like, I remember there was a couple of the Galway players as well, Tobin and that I would have put on the same line. Like, you'd nearly be able to snatch them out of that era and throw them in with a team in a later era, and they just wouldn't give the ball away, and they were good at long kick passes, and they were accurate. And so I suppose that's where the attraction come there,
Yeah, the basics, yeah. And the whole way up through the ranks then, like, John, like, out from obviously Jackie Devine being a player you're kind of aspiring to, like, had you influences within your own family and household, like, that were kind of encouraging, inspirational, from a motivation point of view?
Yeah, well, my father would be more talking about things like, how would you call it, to make sensible decisions, don't kick the ball away type of thing. Don't kick it because someone is roaring at you to kick it. Just, always be looking to find the best pass if you can. Use the ball. I suppose the influence on that would have come from England winning the World Cup in '66, where a lot of games were on television. So unlike the traditional Gaelic football game of the one-on-one, there would have been players he would have watched who, instead of running straight at the goals, might pass the ball out to a winger or something like that, who was in a better position and had more room and time to make a decision. So that would have been drilled into me from an early age, like even playing underage soccer, and that don't give the ball away. If you have to turn back and pass it and then move away and try and take a return. So I suppose that would be the basis of my game, really, I suppose. I'd like to think, anyway.
Valuable advice, isn't it? Like, it's, a very effective advice for that time too. And just when you talk about the soccer team, like, the teams that were willing to make those little changes were obviously going to see success, because it was a jump into the modern style of play.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Like, my father in particular could never understand why the ball would be kicked out sort of 50-50, just drill it down the middle of the field. Like, he would find that extraordinary, foolish, that they wouldn't try to pass it more rather than kick it, I suppose. There's a big difference between a long kick or hoof, as they might say, up the field, and a long pass, because for me, I suppose, and I would repeat this to a lot of players and teams, that the best pass you can give is the longest pass. It's not a long kick, blind kick. It's a long pass. So if you can give a couple of long passes in a game, as the Dublin and Kerry have perfected over the years, maybe Meath to a lesser degree, they've been mightily successful. So instead of maybe looking at what Tyrone do or what Donegal do, we should be looking at the counties like Kerry, who were always there, or maybe Cork, or definitely Dublin in latter years. Their style of play is the trick. It's not all about how fast they can run or how hard they can hit. They have a fantastic watchable style of play, So
a joy to watch.
Yeah, they are good to watch. Yeah, like you don't have to be a fan of either, but you can certainly appreciate what they do and how they do it. Like, they're excellent.
I just think there'll be very few that that don't enjoy that spectacle, because I suppose any Gaelic footballer, it's in you from a young age to play that way and that style. That's what brought us into the game. That's what we loved about the game. Was that expression, the free flowing football, and there's as you said, there's nothing more easier than watching Kerry in full flight, stringing a few passes together, unlocking defences. It's great stuff.
It really is, yeah. And I suppose everybody wants to do it, but they're not all able to do it, So then you have to go back to, the coaching at underage level. And I would be highly critical of some of it years ago. It's all right pulling panels together about what are they actually teaching the players. Like, why can't everybody in this era kick the ball 50 yards accurately with both feet? Like, it's shameful. If you want to be a decent forward, you have to be, for instance, you have to be able to kick the ball with both feet. Even I'd go back as far as a midfielder. The defence, as I've often said, sure, nobody pays money to watch the back, so we're all right.
Easy now.
They can do whatever they want, maul all they like. It's the forwards but the bums on seats, isn't that what they say? That's what they pay. You look at any list of all the great footballers, there's not too many backs in it now. And if they were, they probably played all their lives in the forwards before that. So
I think it's evolving a bit now, of course, but you have a lot more ballers in the defence as well, like as.
Yes, of course. I'm joking.
Yeah, I know. But it's funny is when I was talking to my cousin Enda Lebra on this, and that's one thing that interested me was, and it's something I'd never thought about, was him coming from a defensive point of view, coming to a game, or he was coming to watch that battle, maybe between the full back and full forward, or the corner back and the corner forward, and he was watching the defender, he enjoyed that art of it, and that was something I suppose I never thought about, and it's because when you're in the forward line, you're thinking, of course, straight away you're watching the attacking style of play, but it can be fascinating to look at the other side too.
Oh, absolutely, and the different styles, over the years, I would have been watching different defenders, because I've always thought, well, if you're ever going to manage a team or properly coach a team or an individual, you have to really give them the 3 or 4 different options that might be open to them because of their size or lack of it, or their speed, or maybe they're good on the right side or left side. So over the years, I would have watched some defenders who basically would be standing well out in front of their man, but he'd have a good angle between the ball and the attacker, so that even if they tried to pass it to him, they were going to put the forward in a very neutral type of position where then he can be easily defended against, So
yeah,
that would have been one thing I would have watched. Other defenders I have seen would stand outside the attacker, in that instead of being goal side of him, he was the sideline side of him, because the defence would be more or less crowding the middle, as would be traditional. So by standing outside him, he always had a yard start, or a 2-yard start, or maybe a 3-yard start at times. Like the Kerry defenders, was it McCarthy in particular used to do that. I saw him a few times from behind the goals, and it was very impressive work, and you'd wonder on television when you'd see him winning the ball easily 5-6 yards ahead of the attacker, and you'd be inclined maybe to blame the pass, but the fact is he was highly skilled and intelligent in the way he was defending. So you know.
Yeah, and shutting off where that forward would naturally like to go.
That's it, exactly. I
Mm.
mean, isn't that your job? So that sort of stuff needs to be worked on an awful lot, you know. Let the defender decide then on the type of attacker how he's going to do it, you know.
Yeah. Where did the nickname Speedy come from?
The nickname Speedy, I was wondering when that one was going to come up, and I thought of many, many fascinating stories I could throw at you. But the truth is, the truth,
long ago.
yeah. The truth is that came from the rugby actually.
Okay.
And what happened in one game in particular that we were playing, I can't remember who, but it was possibly at loan. And there would always be a lot of talking going on in the rugby, as in sledging and that sort of stuff.
Mm.
So at a line out, they decided they'd call that they were going to try and get the number 9, which was me. And I kind of said something like, you know, 3 morons on the other side, the number 9 is me. And with that, they decided that they were going to get the little mousy player that was on the other side. So at the time, the Speedy Gonzalez thing with the cartoon was going good. His catchphrase was "Yiba Yiba."
Yeah.
So at the next
That's
scrum, when I picked up the ball, I just went "Yiba" as I went by one of the players, and I got crunched and buried. So I didn't think that was a good idea, but
Brilliant.
I paid dearly for that little bit of lip. It taught me a valuable lesson. But anyway, the lads, of course, cottoned on to it, and it went from Gonzalez at training to Speedy, and that was it, really. That's it.
That's brilliant. That's class. God, I was never aware of that.
Nothing more magical. As I said, there's probably better stories out there, but that's unfortunately the true
No,
one.
well, that's all it takes, and it sticks. Then you've a few boys that latch onto it, and the rest is
That's it,
history.
as you well know.
Oh yeah, for sure. It doesn't take long now. It doesn't take long.
No, not at all. Not at all.
So look at like I actually would, if I had to guess, I would have thought maybe it had something to do with the athletics at the time. You know, you're a quick runner and something
No,
as
not at
this is
all. Not
that.
at
Oh,
all.
that's very intriguing. Actually, very interesting.
Not
But
at all. It had nothing got to do with that whatsoever.
yeah,
I wouldn't be particularly quick, or I would have had loads of stamina for sure.
yeah.
Probably a natural build for stamina, but quick, no, not at all. Not at all. Not in comparison to some of the players that I'd be distinctly average for sure. Yeah, without a doubt. Without a
What
doubt.
moving on then, John? What changed? What changed for you and for Killoe, do you think? You know, in getting on, like, you know, as you're saying, a few difficult years, obviously, you hadn't seen much success underage. Then, you know, with the intermediate, obviously, you were starting to taste success again, and the progression on to senior. Was it just the right crop coming together? Like, when did it start becoming, like, I know this word could be thrown around a lot, like goals and stuff, but I think teams do consciously get to a place where they're like, okay, we're not far off this now. You know, like I know a few lads I've said this to already have said, oh, you're not really thinking about it, you're just going along. But I don't really believe that. I think every team does come to a point where they actually, you know, they know they're competitive, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we or I would have been lucky to grow up with. We would have had a crop of maybe 8, 9, 10 players who were definitely good at underage. I believe it's very hard for, well, maybe it means it's more at county level, but to go from minor, being a successful juvenile minor, and go on to senior is a pretty tricky, difficult job, because players they go away to college, whatever. It would have been the same at that time. But we were lucky, definitely, that most of the lads managed to stay around and get some sort of employment. And that meant we had a successful group who were used to winning. And I honestly believe if you're used to winning, there's a lot of people have wrote articles about it, that a team that's used to winning suddenly, when the crunch comes, can make just the right choices, the right pass, the right shot, the right block, whatever it is. And we just came pretty much together, and we all knew that we were going to be close, whether we could get it or not. It's interesting to note, though, that from we won the minor with a group of players in, what was it, 78, 79, it kind of took us 10 years actually to win the championship, even though we'd got to 2 county finals. So we had a lot to learn along the way at the same time, because there was a few good teams around, and there were basically better than us. That's it in a nutshell. We might have been deemed unlucky, but absolutely every year when we came back to go training, we knew we were close and that the other teams were probably coming back to us a little bit. We began to beat teams in the league that traditionally we would have had a lot of trouble with, and we won a couple of tournaments. That's why winning that Rathline tournament at the time, where there were teams from outside the county, that we could test ourselves in a different way, where we would have been highly motivated bunch for sure around that time. And I suppose the breakthrough come by losing the couple of finals, is that the pain of defeat can drive you. It's peculiar what motivates people, but if we had to lose in 88, I'd say a lot of the team wouldn't have bothered playing again, because I know it would be traditional in Killoe to play Gaelic football, but playing to win is a slightly different thing. Yeah. And I suppose I would have needed a lot of help in a certain way, because I wouldn't be naturally that competitive. Like, I'd have to have me head in the right place to deliver a good performance. So the big games would take a lot out of me in the build-up, not maybe the morning of a match or during the game. I'd have no problem with that. But early on in the week, you'd have all those doubts and you'd be going through everything in your head. So once you had a good team around you, you could sort of fill out as the week could go on that you were going to be the main man here today, and you were going to do it because it wouldn't be your fault. You're not going to let it happen again. So to bounce back in 88 and win, that didn't help us probably in 89 going for a defence of it. That was a very poor performance. But we had a lot of good people around us that sort of, egged you on or helped you or motivated you, whatever you want to call it. So I suppose we discovered that it's not all the 15 on the field might win the game, or get the result, but there's a lot goes on in the background to keep you encouraged and keep you going and that sort of thing. Now, you could also say that there wouldn't have been many distractions, but that wouldn't be quite true, either. But yeah,
I totally agree. It's interesting because you did touch on the confidence before, and I suppose it's something I can relate to 100%. Just on your doubts throughout that week, was it that thing of 87 was difficult defeat, and you're heading into 88 like it was a make or break, is the way you described it there for the squad and for everyone in a sporting sense. And were those doubts did they derive from past defeats and past disappointments, like the fear of it not coming together, or was it a personal thing?
Well, I couldn't really speak for the other lads, but for me personally, the week of a big match, whether it be a championship match with Killoe, because you have to remember these were straight knockout, like a whole year's work could be gone with one blunder, one bad referee call. So there was a lot of riding on it. But early on in the week, I'd say I had every doubt. You had to go from the low of having every doubt, am I fit enough, am I strong enough, can I kick it far enough, one-on-one. You're trying to picture things in your head, you're going to kick off your left foot if you get into this situation, are you going to pass it there if you're in this area of the field, who are you looking for ahead of you, who are you looking to take the ball off that they're going to give it to you, so you can slightly go more committed, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then as the week would go on, I'd go from being the worst in the world to, by the time the ball would be thrown in, to thinking, Jesus, I'm the man here,
That's a good way for it to work out, rather than the opposite, being relaxed at the beginning of the week and then being nervous close to the game.
At the start of the week, I'd always try to remember or think about players that I would have played on who would have given me a very difficult time, where I would deem I was never successful, whether they be an imagined player or a real player. So then I'd go through all those doubts for sure, but by the time the game would come around, I'd be in a very contented, happy place. I'd be raring to go, as to say. I just hope the ball would be thrown in and let's go.
Yeah, that's good. It's good that you were able to do that. I suppose the whole getting into that dressing room is such a huge moment, because it can be a great settler, and it's difficult to harness those doubts and feelings through. They can be energy sapping, but to be able to harness on the day of a match and use the whole build up, and the warm up is a great one, getting in amongst your teammates, and it's very interesting to to hear that you experience that too, like.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think every player does, but
Mm.
sometimes I think being nervous and being excited for the challenge, I think I would have been nervous early in the week, which is where the doubts would be, and you wonder, did I do enough of practice at the freeze? Have I practiced the penalties enough? If this comes down to the last kick, what are you going to be thinking? And so you go from what I would describe, I suppose, I don't know what the sports psychologist would say, but you're going from a kind of a losing
Mm.
way of thinking into being the hero way of thinking. Like, if I get this free, I know I'm going to nail it. There's no doubt whatsoever.
Mm.
But that would take 3 or 4 days of
Visualizing.
turmoil, I suppose, when you get settled and you start thinking about things. Maybe maybe we thought too much. We just go out and do it, like.
Yeah, well, look at some people operate that way and others don't. You seem to do a lot of visualization without realizing it too. You seem to be thinking a lot about which is it's a buzzword now today in the games. Visualizing what might happen, visualizing different positions. You were saying you're visualizing what foot you're going to kick off. You were thinking ahead. And probably without realizing that a lot of these things came to fruition.
Yes, without a shadow of a doubt. I know it's a buzzword now, but definitely I would have been big into that, because I think there's an added onus on you if you are the free taker. There is a lot of responsibility there. Like, some fella could be getting half killed in a tackle, and he gets you into a scoring area. That's your job as the free taker. And early on in my game, I found that very hard to separate. So if I missed a chance, I tend to dwell on it for maybe 30 seconds or a minute after. You'd have the usual visible signs of sort of shaking your head, or whatever way you decide to show your disappointment. But I kind of learned from reading books on that around that time that showing too much emotion on a Gaelic football field is a bad thing. You need to keep your focus and just move on, and that's where you learn to separate the free taking from the general game. So even though you could never see the ball in the game, if you're nailing the frees, very good. And if things are going well for you in the game, you still have to nail each free. Like, there's no point in getting carried away. So I learned to focus very much on each individual kick. It never bothered me after a few years what had happened previous. And I suppose that's when you're getting to a good place. That would have been, say, around 27, 28, where you sort of seen the mixture of stuff that can happen in a game. And then you're happy in your own place, in your own head for each kick. And it was actually one of the snooker players who said something one time about, you concentrate on every shot the same. It doesn't matter whether you're going for the win in black or just the first red at the start of it. You have to concentrate 100% on each individual kick and move on to the next one quickly.
Yeah.
And I suppose that was that stayed with me all my life, I suppose, from there on. Once I got into that groove, now it's for other people to judge whether it was successful or not, but it kind of worked.
I find it brilliant that you were, that the way you took ownership, and you were aware of what you were thinking, but you took ownership in the sense that you were reading, you were applying tools, you were looking at different sports, even taking little pieces from it. It makes such a difference.
Yeah, but I would definitely have overthought it maybe early on, where I would have been a disaster, maybe taking the freeze, or maybe people wouldn't have realized that your head just wasn't it was in a bad place, your concentration was gone. That happened to me as well in matches, that you don't know why and you try to get it back. And maybe that's where free takers in particular maybe need someone, a mentor, maybe on the sideline or in the backroom team, who can sort of pull you aside and say, look, we need to get back to the basics here. Get your breathing right, get your focus right. Remember what we talked about, how we did it, how you aim. Forget about the outside pressure. the pressure of the crowd, the scoreboard, the internal pressures that you go through. You know, I'd probably spoken about it with yourself and a few of the other lads over the years. And like at that time, there was nobody around that you could say, well, I'm in a bit of a knot here. How am I going to get out of this one? You know? Instead, you probably get a bollock at half time.
I know, yeah. I know.
Or it'd feel like the whole team talk was directed at you, whereas it possibly was directed at me,
yeah,
you know?
Yeah. I know I can 100% relate. It's very interesting to hear that you had that experience too. And I actually remember one time there was a sports psychologist, there was a psychologist brought in to work with us one time at the county, and he did do a bit of work with me. But I there's another line there in the sense that you could have somebody coming in to work with you, but that can escalate your overthinking in one sense. There's an understanding there that has to be made clear first, you know, that, you know, the purpose of this and how to use the tools, because it can go the opposite way as well, where you can overthink the things you're overthinking, if that's possible. But it actually is possible to actually go further into that zone of overthinking everything. But it's to have, first of all, have the basic understanding of the psychology of what you're dealing with.
Well, I totally agree with that, because that's why you can't bring somebody in to change a behavior that you've learned over a number of years. You can't bring somebody in and expect them to change that overnight. And by overnight, I'd be talking about weeks or possibly months of working with someone, because you have to trust them. You have to trust.
Yeah.
It also helps that they may have been in that situation, so they can totally relate. Like you know, I remember reading some of the sports psychologists was brought in to some of the O'Shea's in Kerry, and when he sat down with him, I think it was Mark O'Shea's, I'm not sure which, asked the psychologist how many All-Ireland medals had he won, and your man said, well, none. Well, he said, I have 4 or 5, and he got up and he walked out. So I don't know whether he came round to the sports psychologist in the end, but you must have total trust. And I think sometimes players see someone, even coming from a different background, but coming from purely an academic background, they're thinking, well, has he really been here? Does he really know what it's like to pick up the ball in the last seconds of an important match and have to score a goal?
Yeah.
And there's the feeling of the expectation and everything, but that's where I think preparation really comes into its own, because it's kind of routine. You know, this is not part of the game. This is a very separate.
Yeah. Like, and he's just coming in to accommodate you. Like, you know,
yes,
and
yes.
if you slip into that thing of, oh well, he has no idea what it's like to be out here, and you know, you're putting up a barricade there straight away.
Absolutely, yes, I totally agree with that. Well, if you're going in to help anybody at anything, I suppose there's a little bit of resistance there, and sometimes it can be a major resistance to any sort of change, because most fellas think they're going good. They wouldn't have, I suppose, what would you call it, a self-awareness type of thing, that you're not doing very well in this aspect at all. You're overcompensating. One thing is going particularly good, but you have 2 things. If you could only improve a little, 1 or 2%, you'd be a good player then, you know, instead of distinctly average most of the time, you know. So
yeah, but the switch comes from within, as you and I both know. There's always fellas that, you know, they'll never probably engage in self-awareness, and no matter how, you know, can always be quite unapproachable when it comes to maybe changing certain aspects of the game. And it has to start with yourself. And you know, it's very you know, it's very refreshing to hear, you know, and I appreciate you being so honest about it too, you know, because
well, I'm all right. I'm 60 years of age.
I know,
Bite
yeah,
me on
but
the ass. No one's going to come out and whisper in my ear tomorrow.
But you know, it's I know, but it's common. You know, it's common, and it can swallow you up. You know, and you have to, like everything in life, nearly, you have to find ways to harness it. You have to find the tools that help you. And you know, there's so much education out there now, and there's so many different methods that cater for, because we're all different and we all have different ways of dealing with it. You know, so it's basically researching, finding what works for you, and using it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I would agree. But what you said earlier about overthinking what you shouldn't be overthinking
Mm.
on the double, I would say that definitely affected me for a couple of months, where I got so much into reading about focus and all that sort of stuff. I
Mm.
found that I was probably brilliantly focused on the Wednesday or the Thursday before a game, but the meltdown started on the Friday and the Saturday.
Mm.
By the time I got in there, my head would be all over the place. So again, I was probably trying to do too much and forgetting about what I could do well,
Yeah.
and nearly take it as gospel what I was reading, that, well, this is what you should do, you know.
Yeah.
So there's always a mixed feeling on things like that, like, and everybody is different.
Of
I've
course.
often said people pick up things in different ways, you know. As you would know, through teaching, there's many different ways to get your point across, but you have to find the one that your pupil as such
Mm.
relates to most, you know, and then you can work away with them, you know. Plus, Gaelic football is a very peculiar thing, even at parish level, like, where you're kind of hammered a lot of the time during matches, and you can hear some of the stuff that's been said. And so there's a tendency to say all the time, you're not good enough, you're not good enough, if you know what I mean. Whereas if
Yeah.
you watch soccer matches at, you know, an ordinary level, and you can hear they're encouraged all the time. They're told they're unlucky. They're not called you're a F and B, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you'd hear them saying stuff like, "Oh, you were unlucky with that. That was a good attempt." Whereas the competitive element in Gaelic football, the parish rule type thing, means you must be massacring the other parish from your under 11, under 13 up. Like, you know, like, there's no room for any error there. You know what this is all about. You must humiliate your opponent, so from your next
Yeah.
door neighbour, because he plays with a different parish. Like, you know.
Exactly. Or don't talk to him.
Aye, that's right. Don't be
Yeah.
talking to him. He get into your head.
What are you talking to him for? Sure, the best the other day.
That's right. Yeah, there is that. There is that undercurrent in. Well, there has been.
Yeah.
I'm
I
not
think
sure
it's.
it's there now. In my era, it was definitely there.
Yeah.
Like when Tommy and Jimmy and your dad were playing with Clongaish, like, if
Mm.
I was seen talking to them, or they were suspicious of me because I played soccer with the lads, like, you know, geez, is he really with us type of thing when you were
Yeah.
playing Clongaish, you know.
How were they received when they came in first? Like, you know,
But
like from.
personally, I thought it was brilliant. Personally, I would have said that was a major, major turning
But
point.
that would have been a couple of months, John, wouldn't it? Like, literally, you're talking about a couple of months when these lads are just coming into your squad, because, like, you're talking about 87, 88. So,
Yeah,
like,
but for me it was different because, well, I would have known your dad through the rugby,
mm,
and I would have known the other lads through the soccer, and
soccer, yeah.
so for me, I was already their teammate as far as I was concerned.
Yeah.
It meant nothing to me but glory as far as I was concerned. Like, I was so happy that they joined and played. And there's possibly a major element that was the one small, well, maybe it's not a small thing. They had to swap parish teams,
Mm.
but for me, that was it. That was the clincher. Like, you know, we
So
had
it's
to.
just, I suppose accepting and receiving them in a short space of time was a big thing as well, you know.
Well, you see, this is where I can't speak for anybody else,
Oh,
but
I know.
for me, as I said, I was already their teammates in other sports. So
It was
while I
easy.
wouldn't have played a whole lot of rugby at that time because you couldn't, but any free Saturday I often played. So, and we always played in the five-a-side and that together. So
Yeah.
no, I had no problem at all.
Well, Daddy would often say that to me, actually, about just the other codes, the difference they made, because you got to know a few fellas. And obviously, look, in any, you know, there's always going to be a few within the group who, you know, who it's more difficult probably to accept in. You know, it's a natural thing. You know, not everybody is going to be welcome to it, but it was
Yeah, well,
it was just, you know, it was a short window. You know, it really was a short window to, you know, three lads to come in and be a part of a squad. You know, sometimes it can take time for that to gel, but it was great in a way, the way it just came together, you know.
oh yeah, and like, it was a big thing for them to change over as
Oh, of
well. Don't
course, yeah.
forget, you know,
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
like we probably wouldn't have looked at it that they had the problem. Plus, the suspicion would arise, I suppose, the fact that they would have hammered the daylights out of us a few times, and now they're coming to play with you. Like, what's the real idea? What's the motivation?
Mm,
Whereas for me, I would be very single-minded in that respect. If they
yeah.
were going to help me get all I wanted was one Connolly medal. If that was going to help me get that medal, that was fine by me. Like, you know. But as I said, I didn't have the problem of the others because I was already their teammate. So and got on well. Plus the fact that a lot of people thought I was a younger brother, so that really helped me. So when when the war started, I always got away lightly because the other two would throw them a death stare, and now the Tommy McCormack death stare went a long way at that time. So.
Oh, Chris, yeah, but the surname kept their advantage.
We didn't call Jimmy the Tomahawk for no reason. So.
Oh, 3 rare boys to get in now, I have to say.
No, it was great, sure.
Yeah, great. Cool. So come here, John, then talk to me about the journey to the county then. Who was responsible for getting you into the county setup?
Well, I didn't play minor football with Longford at all. So I may have played one challenge match or something like that. I don't remember. I was never part of a minor team. So then somebody had the idea of getting an actual training squad together. So for the county senior team.
Who was that?
I think that may have been Eugene McGee. Now, I would be open to question on that, but I think it was Eugene McGee got the idea that get a training panel together now and see how it goes. You know, keep them training for a certain period of time. And there would have been a group of about maybe 35 in there the first night I went in. And while I don't remember being selected on the under-21 panel at that time, I ended up on it through the training with the seniors, and we got to the Leinster final. So this was, while it was big success in one way, it was moving in the right direction all the time, I suppose, you know. And I was beginning to get the notion that after a year of training with them that I might get me place on the team. So again, I was still after that number 10 Jackie Devine jersey just to say I played for the county, you know. So that would have kept my motivation, even though I was training away. I don't think I only got maybe one bit of a game at the end of 81. And I would have played, I made my debut then in a league match against Leitrim, which was great, down in Killoe. And I scored 2-3, and I think maybe the people began to have a little bit of belief in me after that, even though I was told directly after that match that I'd never make a county player by somebody who might have been a Leitrim supporter. I don't know.
No, that's fairly after words. Yeah, but it's amazing. Like, I suppose every player can relate to a game or a moment, or like you felt change things for you personally and change, you know, for your career going forward. Was that it for you?
Oh, absolutely. Getting on and actually playing, starting a league match. The fact that at that time the local derby with Leitrim was a big thing, because a lot of those lads would have gone to St. Mel's and that, you know. So there would be a natural rivalry, not just because of the border and the farmers meeting in the marts and all that sort of stuff, but everybody would have been working together and possibly related. So this was a huge thing, and we were left in no doubt, or I was left in no doubt, this was a big, big game. This was, if you win this game, you know, you're okay for the rest of the year. No one had passed too much remarks. So to get on and sort of come out of it with 2-2 or 2-3, whatever it was, yeah, I felt maybe if I keep going now, this might work out for me, you know.
Brilliant. Did you enjoy your county career?
I would have had mixed feelings with it, because there was times I felt there was a lot of pressure on us, and that would have come from mostly the media. We never seemed to be able, unlike now where I don't see teams being criticised for being poor or poor performances. There might be one throwaway comment, but we got pretty much hammered. Like, even though we got to a Byrne Cup finals, and that would have been deemed success for the way the county football was going a couple of years before that, where they couldn't get anybody to play. And yet we were being hammered for different reasons by the media. That was never pleasant, no.
It's very funny. It's very funny you say that. I found this old book actually out home, the 1887 to 1987 Longford football, you know, and it had short little match reports on it. But there's one thing that struck me about reading a few of them, was just so harsh. It was actually hilarious. It was that harsh, the way they might sum up a lad's performance, you know. It'd be like just a bullet of a sentence at the end, like literally just the words weren't minced, put it that way.
Yeah.
They were as well just right. X was terrible.
Yeah. Or why wasn't he taken off earlier?
Yeah, it was like recording what supporters were saying there. Like, it's funny.
Yeah, that shows you that
the mindset. Right?
Yeah, well, the other thing was that the people at the games, or probably weren't at the game, would be relying on what one individual reporter decided to write, whether it was in slightly tongue-in-cheek, but I don't think that existed at that time. So we were really criticised very, very harshly at times, like very harshly. And that definitely got through, because as I said, when you're out at work, you know, people making comments about the game who weren't there, but they read the report, the local report on the news, or the leader, or they heard a brief report on the radio or something. Although luckily there was no local radio then, or we'd surely be hammered. Some pundit coming in making a name for himself. Huh?
Yeah. People can't make up their own mind sometimes, you know, their own view. They just whatever they read is gospel, you know.
Yeah. Well, as I said, the atmosphere sometimes trying to get yourself going training on it took a while to get used to just ignoring it. It's only one man's opinion, so therefore you have to ignore it. While he has a lot of sway and a lot of people reading that report, you really did have to learn. Again, that was part of the learning experience with Longford. But on the other side of it, I loved it. I have to say, I did love it. It's easy to be a little bit flippant in hindsight, but I wouldn't have done it if I didn't enjoy it. You know, there were moments, obviously, that weren't pleasant, but there you go.
And come here, as a young lad coming on to that squad, then was there any big characters, big players there that you kind of looked up to, or liked being around, or were good to you?
Oh, yeah. Well, I suppose the standout one, I've often said it, that Sean O'Shea would have been the most interesting character, and the one who would have been, for me, he was the natural leader. There was just something about the swagger he had playing football in Dublin, his ability to communicate with the younger lads like myself coming onto the team. And yeah, he would have been a main man as far as I would be concerned. Anything that good that happened in Longford football, his fingerprints are there someplace if you look. His influence, if you look at the results in the games he played in, for instance, every time he's been around, the results have been pretty good. The minute he disappeared off the scene, I would suggest that bond he was able to, that way of talking, that way of communicating, I think was lost on the whole lot, and it didn't help. No, he would have been a major influence. Mick Casey, obviously, serious footballer, and he would have been a big man as well in the panel. You know, we would have kind of followed whatever their lead. You know, if they wanted to drive something on or push harder in training, we got the word from them like this is serious now. You know, so absolutely they would have been too.
Yeah, key men driving from the back as well, I'm sure. And when you were breaking into that forward line, you know, you used to, in the early days, you know, you played with a lot of different forwards on the county scene, you know, and even from your early days to the latter ones, like it did change drastically. But in the early days, it was kind of there's a lot of familiar and well-known characters you played alongside.
Yeah, well, you see, the other thing was probably at the start. For me, combined football, there was still an element of the catch and kick thing, and that really wouldn't have suited me at all. So as the thing developed, and the likes of Desi and Mickey O'Hara and Frank McNamee, as they came into it, then the game kind of changed slightly, because they were a different type of player, I suppose, than the older school. So it was a more combined style of football then, you know.
Yeah, well, I guess I was looking at some of the old reports, and you know, yourself and Desi would have been in the half forward line kind of in the early days. You know, like when you were quite young coming on, and like you had huge target men in there. You had Kevin O'Rourke, Pat Malooly, Eugene McCormack played a bit in the corner as well, didn't he?
He did indeed, yeah. Well, it's interesting. You should. Pat was an absolute gentleman, I'd have to say. He was again, it's interesting because he had such a quiet way of going on. I'd have possibly forgotten how big an influence he was, because when things wouldn't be going well, he'd be absolutely the first one over to you after a game to say, come on, keep your chin up, sure. It's, life's a little bit better than that. It's not all doom and gloom. Sure, we'll go out and sing a song and everything will be grand, because he's a bit of that type of character.
Yeah.
So there would have been like the rest of us. He would have been young coming in, so I suppose he was learning as he went along as well.
Very important for a young player to hear that too, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. But well, instead of getting hammered by the local media and the lads on the hill, it was always nice when things didn't go well, because Pat would have seen the good sides, some good sides, I suppose, but a lot of bad times with Longford as well, because like in the 70s, they were a very poor outfit from what I can see or remember,
Yeah, and it just goes to show the importance of when that dressing room is happy and lads can support each other. You'll always, the outside will always be the outside, and it won't get in and it won't influence, because it's so important that you don't let it fester into the dressing room, and lads believing that you back each other and you have each other's backs. And because at the end of the day, you're going to war with each other on the training pitch, and you're going to war in the matches, and all you have to worry about is having the support of lads that's pulling on that jersey with you.
Yeah, that's very true. But another important thing was you were given the space to do that as well. Like when John Murphy came into the thing, he had a few of his ideas, and he would have probably leaned on Sean O'Shea a little bit from his background. And I suppose the space was given for fellas to give an opinion. Like every now and again, there would be a meeting where you'd throw stuff out there and see how you're going to improve on things. And another important thing was, I suppose, that the wives and the girlfriends were treated properly. They were brought to games, and while there may have been a dispute or two over whether they were allowed in for dinner or not at away matches and that, but in general, the trick was to keep a happy camp, I suppose, as you say, because it was vitally important. For me, as a younger fella going in there, I was just happy to be there for a year or two. So a lot of stuff would have went over my head, to be honest about it.
Yeah.
I didn't see myself as any great leader or anything coming in to shake the whole lot up. I'd be like everybody else. I kept my head down and just hoped that I'd get my chance. And when the chance come, I'd do myself and the family and parish and everything like that proud at the end of the day. But ultimately, it's a selfish game. So I suppose I was in it for what I could get out of it too,
Well, it was. I think it was more so back then, because that's just the way it was, and you knew no differ.
That's it.
I don't think it's as selfish nowadays. What I have noticed is that, for years there, you had a lot of teams, even at club and county, you'd be kind of very dependent on one or two for big scores, but generally those teams weren't successful. It was the teams that were, that were able to, have a better spread of scores and work more as a collective. Like if you look at the great Dublin team now that we talk about, like when years ago Dublin were reliant on Bernard Brogan for the massive scores, maybe in particular, or one other, they weren't successful. They always got so far, like a lot of teams. But
yes.
And when Tyrone came on the scene that time, people talked about the swarm defence and all that. What they do sometimes fail to ignore and miss out on was they were working as a collective unit in every aspect of the game.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Like I'd have to say for most of my involvement in county football, the tactics, no, there was no real tactic.
Yeah.
It would be an old school approach, but I would have tended to wander a lot, because I figured that because I wasn't particularly quick or strong, that I had to get the game played on my terms. So I would wander an awful lot during matches, looking to pick up the ball, or looking to pick up Andy ball, I suppose, what they were shouting in. But
that drove a manager mad too, I'd say.
Oh God, I feel for Tommy McCormack sometimes. And God knows numerous other managers.
Yeah, but those when I look back, like those, in '93 and '95, like Killoe did play smart though. At the same time, Killoe had little, Tommy had implemented little maneuvers here and there, roving roles for players that kind of made a difference. Like,
Oh yeah, yeah, obviously, yeah. But
Yeah,
then Tommy had played a lot, as I
yeah,
said. He'd seen
huge
the good.
experiences. That.
He came on to the tail end of the great Longford team,
Mm,
and I suppose he saw the barren years then with Clongish as well, probably
yeah,
through the 70s and that. So he probably figured out that something has to change. You know, you can't keep doing the same thing over, as we know, and hope for the result to change.
yeah.
And
And
this is
important for any
where,
managers, that, you know.
yeah, like the it's hard to see. You see managers changing, and with County, with Longford in particular, in the last few years. But has there been a noticeable change in their style? Like, are they doing anything different for all the training and all the hours that the lads put in? And as we know, as you know in particular, you put in an awful amount of time, whether you're just trying to maintain your standard, or you're coming back from injury, or you're trying to
Mm.
improve a standard. But the results don't seem to change, you know. So I don't know. I don't know.
It's I suppose as a results-based game, and it's it's in an ideal world you'd like to say, well, look, I want you to go in, I want you to put you have time, you have our back, and I want you to put your stamp on this team. And I
Yeah,
suppose
yeah,
that's where you might have a better chance of putting your own influence on the team. But when you come in and your window's short, you're kind of, straight away you're kind of going to go with what's working, what's making you competitive.
yeah. Well,
And
obviously I can understand.
yeah,
You see,
yeah.
It's easy for me here to suggest that you don't see much of a change of style and that sort of
Mm,
thing, you know. But I don't have to implement it. Maybe I'd do the same thing if I was put in there. I don't know, but
yeah. Oh, you're look at you're a purist, you're a purist like so many that just
yeah,
wants to see.
there was some writer out there. I can't remember. Was it Victor Frankl? He wrote one time about a tragic optimism, and maybe that's what all Longford footballers have. It's even though they
Yeah,
absolutely know deep down, but you suspend that little bit of belief just to have a go. You think you're on a 50-50 here, but deep down you know you're not.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, so
It's very
maybe
interesting.
that's it. It's a tragic optimism that
Shot, yeah,
affects us
yeah.
all.
I'll be quoting that. I'll be quoting that again
That's the
for
stuff.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm here all day. Lots of quotes for you.
Oh well, look at like you're like the word legend can be thrown out so often, John. Like, and you definitely fall into that bracket with so many others. Like, and just those players, all those great players you played with, throughout that time with the county, and they're still talked about today, and huge characters as well. Like that's one thing I always seem to take away from listening to different conversations and
Well,
about.
I suppose the character thing, like we would have been, that 80s team would have been reasonably good
Mm,
on a national level. Like we were very competitive in every game we played, whether it was mixed, whatever way the team or the panel would have been mixed up and played, or subs coming in. We would have probably been, how would you say, there was no real outstanding player, if you know what I mean. There was a general level of talent there that meant we were very, very competitive for an awful lot of matches, you know. But every team probably only has a cycle of 2 or 3 years before something has to change to keep going forward. And I suggest that the number of players in Longford, more than maybe Leitrim and Roscommon, is a problem. Yeah, the churn of players just isn't there to keep, add
yeah.
another 2% to it in 3 years' time, when this particular 26 are coming to the end of what they can give, So,
Mm,
oh, look at who knows, who knows.
mm.
As I said, I'd have real mixed feelings about different things like that.
I
Sometimes I think
know.
they're doing great, and then, like the average supporter, the result goes wrong, and I'd be thinking, sure, God bless his fire to doing that. Like,
Yeah.
no, look at,
John,
it's
just
just noise at the end of the day, isn't it?
I don't like bringing you back too much, though, but just when you talk about, I suppose from my own perspective, I want to ask you a question. When you talk about, the overthinking and the confidence from before, and you talked about you really enjoyed your county experience, but you didn't like the pressure of it too at times as regards outside media
Mm.
influence, things like that. Did you did you ever reach a point where you wanted to just break away from the game?
Yes, absolutely. That's why I didn't play in the championship in '89. I'd had a belly full of it at that stage, and for whatever reason, whether it be true or not, I had a feeling that the panel had become split from the local Longford players and the players training in Dublin at the early part of the year. And I was actually captain of the county team at that time, so it was a huge, believe me, this was a huge decision to walk away before the championship.
God.
And the saddest part of it was I was playing an ESB game on the following Wednesday night after Longford were beaten down in Wicklow, and the heading on the leader when I was going into the game, I happened to see it thrown in the car beside me, was that the headline in the leader was something like Speedy would have made no difference. So even when I'd walked away from it, now obviously somebody was feeling guilty about something that they let me walk so easy, but that's what happened. And I don't know. I just couldn't take it. I couldn't take the nonsense, I suppose, that I felt was going on. I didn't give us a chance in that game, so I took the cowardly way out in one sense and I walked.
I wouldn't say cowardly. I'd say, like if you don't believe in what's going on and you're thinking that way, like, there's nothing cowardly about it, but very, very harsh headline.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. That's what I mean about sometimes
you're looking at that as a player, and it's probably hard not to think to yourself, well, what am I doing this for? If they can just write something like that so easily.
Yeah. Well, that's simply the way it was. I wouldn't have overthought that. I just thought it was a peculiar thing. Fellas had given a lot to go down to Wicklow and be beaten. As I've said before, it's hard to win a championship match, and let alone win a championship. Like everybody is going full tilt. There's nobody at half pace here or taking out a minute or two for a rest. It's full on. So that kind of it annoyed me more for the other lads, to be honest with you. I thought it was why mention someone who wasn't there. I just felt that
of course,
poor, that was ridiculous. And like, funny enough, it would have meant I had a very short inter-county career, really, because I was sent off in the first round in 1987, and I had to be taken off. What year was it? Well, there was a year, I think 86. We were playing up in Louth, and I had tonsillitis the week of the game, and I think there was a couple of players missing through injury, and there was real pressure put on me to play, or at least start, even though they knew and I knew I wasn't able. But I did foolishly agree to start the game, and sure, I think I was gone maybe at half time or maybe before. As far as I made a terrible error there. I shouldn't have even topped out. But
I know, but look, at that time is different.
I was trying to do right by the team, so I suffered greatly for that.
Sure, it was probably frowned upon back then if you were even if you were carrying an injury and you weren't willing to play. Like it wouldn't.
God, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
There'll still be an element of that today,
That was a execution straight away there at Dawn for doing something like that.
Good job they've done away with that.
Good job is right.
Good job you're in Ireland.
Yeah, mind you, I saw Martina looking up A's there last week. I think she was looking for an assassin. This lockdown, but there you go.
Quish. I was admiring that team photo there you gave me, actually. I was saying, like, some heads of hair in the lads back then.
Oh yeah, we have beautiful hair.
There was no
nowadays. If it was nowadays, we'd be getting sponsored shampoo and all that.
Yeah, I love the retro shirts as well. Like there were those Longford jerseys were classics in my eyes.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see a bit of variation back then as well. You must have had a background designer or something, had you?
Not that I know of. If it was, they were kept very quiet.
Yeah, I know there was some of them great variations over the year for that time,
Yeah. I suppose somebody was working with the design in O'Neill's.
Yeah.
That stage, yeah.
Great, John. Well, thanks a million for sharing that. And I suppose what brought that around then? What got you back in then? Was there anyone in particular responsible for mending that divide, or did that divide continue on for a couple of years?
Well, I think I didn't play in '89. I went back in 1990 when Desi Dolan took over, And the truth is, I shouldn't have went back. And the truth is, after possibly a couple of months, he should have. Like I have to say, I have great time for Desi Dolan. I really have. And the truth is, I didn't help him. It's a regret I have that I just wasn't tuned in for him in that year. And I didn't play at all then in '91, I think it was. I didn't play in the championship again. I kind of bailed again because I don't know. It's very hard to put a finger on why it happened. But after '88, I figured that was it. We did a good run in the league, got to the quarter final. We'd won a couple of matches in Leinster, which, as we know, Longford don't do too often. It's very hard.
Difficult.
Maybe with the round robin and that, but in a straight championship, we won 2 matches to meet a good Dublin team. We gave it our best shot, and I felt that I was after coming back from a knee injury where I was out for 4 or 5 months, whatever it was, and I gave that everything, and we came up short. And I think at that moment I knew that I was not going to win a Leinster title in a Longford jersey, so I kind of bailed at that stage. I didn't really know it. It only manifested itself later. But if I have a regret, it was going back in under Desi Dolan and not giving it the full lash, as they say. You know, I thought I was cutting myself, and I was cutting him, and I was cutting the lads around me. And that would definitely be, in hindsight, a huge regret that I did that. I should have been more honest and upfront. And
so is that what you say? Would you say to a young lad nowadays?
Yeah, but I'd be a shy enough individual in that respect, you know. So
yeah, well, you have to understand too. Like back then, I'd imagine it wouldn't have been the norm for somebody to come up and have that conversation with a coach.
No. But I would have had a good relationship with Desi.
Yeah, I know.
He trained us like in 88, 89 in the club. And I always liked him, and he actually he used to go shooting with my father and that. So he became a kind of a personal friend as well. And as I said, I would have that regret that I just didn't do enough for him. Maybe I hadn't the energy. I was spent force as regards county football at that stage, you know. So I didn't play in '92, and I came on a sub, or in '91. I came on a sub in '92, scored a goal in a heavy defeat from Wicklow, I think it was at the time. So that was really it in a nutshell. I was finished then. I've often said to people that when you start to think about retiring, or if the word comes into your head, that you're probably a couple of years behind the curve on that one.
Yeah.
And if you want proof that it's time to go, when you're having a conversation with somebody on the street or in the pub or whatever, and they say something like, they use the word still, you can still kick a pint, or you can still get around the field, or you can still, you know, score a penalty. You know you're on the slide there and then, because the still is the word no competitive athlete, footballer, whatever wants to hear. It's a bad word to hear.
Yeah.
So I would use.
You could.
Huh?
You could.
You could. You used to.
Yeah,
but you can still kick a pint, like, you know, which means you're just about justifying your place on the team, but not really.
You still have a bit to offer.
That's right. Yeah. We've all been there. Well, you're about to be there, so.
Yeah, I know what you mean. When that word comes, when it even comes into the head, you know, it's hard to just,
the brave thing then, I think, is to walk away and just get on with your life and do something different. You know, find another way to fill your time.
Yeah.
You know, it's. I suppose that's why every footballer, county player that doesn't win that their All Ireland or their league or whatever, they probably have a lot of regret leaving, because in one sense you put so much effort into something and you just come up short, you know. Whatever about little personal things that might happen to fall your way, ultimately you failed in the main goal, which is to be out there and try and win your Leinster championship at Longford. That was my goal, like, you know. So I would have considered I did everything possible for the 4 or 5 years that I would have been injury free in that, and it just didn't work out. So I think people then are almost identified by being a county player, and then suddenly you're not one. So your identity slips a little bit, where you're judged on a weekly basis on how you performed on the Sunday before, you know.
Mm.
So if things go well, everybody is happy to talk to you on the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then the focus turns to the next game on sort of Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Yeah.
So your identity is all around your performance in a blue and gold jersey, and
You're only as good as your last game, as I always say.
but,
That's the one
that's the
phrase
cliche. Yeah,
always attached with you. You know, you can.
yeah. Well,
Uh,
a lot of the cliches are cliches and repeated
mm,
because they're actually true. Like you
yeah,
know, we often joke about stuff, but the fact is, there's a hidden truth behind everything. It's like the good comedians, you know, the best jokes have an awful element of truth in what they're saying, you know. And
mm.
that's the way it is. We just had to put up with it, I suppose, at the time.
It applies. Then there's the odd lad who can, you know, he might play well once, but it'll do him a lifetime.
Oh yeah, well that's. I often said that I got lucky that way. I played one or two good matches, maybe at the right time, but after that I was probably distinctly average, or even below that. But
No,
nobody
not
saw
at
those.
all. God, you're
Nobody
not.
saw those games, so they can't comment. And thanks be to God, there was no main videos or anything.
Jeez, you don't fall into that bracket, anyway. Look, I suppose, just in conversation with you there, John, and I hope you don't mind me asking you this. It's just something that's come into my head there. As a young lad growing up, now it was never in my household, but did I actually was fortunate enough to, you know, I still remember no more than other countries, but as a local level and being a club man of mine, I am very fortunate to have childhood memories and flashes of you playing, you know, being in around the 93 and 95 dressing room and being on the
Mm.
sideline. And I still can see you kicking frees. And I'm nearly 100% sure I remember you playing one of your latter games with Killoe, maybe against Drumlish in a league match in Clonee. I don't know, and still kicking a pint from 40 yards out. I don't know if that game is fresh in your head. But there's also, what I also remember is you almost disappearing, if I can ask. And I suppose as a young lad growing up, you know, your name is always in conversations in our parish, like, you know, and you're a legend of the game in our area. And I, you know, you had gone into management and different things, but I suppose when you kind of finished with Killoe or you're coming near the end, I suppose at the point I'm at now, I understand, I think, perfectly. Like, did you kind of just go that other route and just do different things? Like, you know, you made the decision, you went into management for a while and you had good experience and great runs in your management career, but was there also that element of, right, I've made the decision now, I'm moving on, I'm in the next chapter? I hope that
Um,
question comes across clear.
oh yeah, yeah,
because
absolutely,
because
yeah.
I would have, like, if I'm being honest, I would have grown up. You would hear these things. Oh, you know, you never see him, you never see Speedy around, or he's not involved in the club, or this sort of thing. You know, like, and these things would have been said if we're being honest. Like, but I completely get it. You know, I completely understand it from a player's point of view and perspective. If that was a case that you had, you know, not consciously, but just got on with life and just done different things, went watched other sports, just done different, you know, took different avenues.
Well, first of all, I'd say absolutely. I went, as you alluded to, I went into management literally straight away after I stopped playing, which was a mad thing when I think back, because it's a whole different experience. And I got lucky that I went to a good group of lads and they responded brilliantly and they won their championship and the league and that. So um, then I went up, I was in St. Lomans for a year and the team was absolutely decimated with injuries. So by the time we got through, I think it was a semi-final, Gary Castle beat us by a point, and that had come to its natural end as well. And I was back then with Keena for a year or two, and a load of them left the country, the players, for employment and that. So what was a reasonably good team and a team I felt would win something, again, they were decimated by people leaving. So the next thing I suppose that happened then was I was never asked, is probably the
Yeah,
simple way of putting it. I genuinely was never asked.
but that's the other
So,
side of it. You know, that's the
well, as
thing you
I
might
said,
never hear.
To be an element, as I said, I'd be kind of a shy individual. I wouldn't be inclined to put myself out there. Like I would never. Some people would be inclined to maybe judge my character because I sold the dummy and kicked the pint, like that he'd be an arrogant little fella, you know, and full of himself. But the truth is that would be an image. I'd be a very shy individual, or private individual might be a better word.
Yeah.
And so with the kids in college in Dublin, etc. at that time, I suppose I got decided that we'd follow Leinster for a while because the Heineken Cup had got big. So I genuinely wasn't around. It didn't bother me. The fact I figured if somebody wants me to do something, should I come and ask me to know where I live? Like, you know.
Isn't it funny though how narrative can be formed, you know? Like it just comes down to the simple thing of not being asked, you know. Or
that's what it would have boiled down. There's no point in me. I'm not trying to sugarcoat it or anything. The fact is, I wasn't asked. I don't think I've ever refused if I was asked, because I'd be one of these people who would be inclined to say yes, probably regret it for the next 24 hours, and then say, "Shall we go and see what happens?"
Ditto. I get that.
yeah. Always say yes. It's easy to say, well, this isn't going to work out, and it doesn't. But sure, if you don't try it out, you won't know, you know. So.
I know, and I hope you didn't mind me asking you that. Like, so that's something I would have experienced, I would have heard, you know. So I appreciate you.
Yeah, well, people seem to think that I stopped living, whereas I had the best 10 years of my life, for God's sake. So I started. I started to follow. I went to a few of the Dubs matches and one thing and another, and then we got in with Leinster. And I'd go to the odd Killoe game as well, but I'd stand off on my own. Now, they might think I'm stupid, but I still do that at matches. If I go, I tend to stand on my own because I like watching the game. I don't want to hear what people are saying. I'm just get into it that way, you know.
You don't want to end up beside someone who just talks the whole game and doesn't watch a bit of it.
Yeah, and then they tell you who was good or bad before the game starts. They nearly tell you who was good or bad during it, you know. Like, but
nothing beats the lad you meet the next day who tells you all about the game and was never at it.
Yeah. There's even people who write about it and they don't even be at them. Trust me.
I could be wrong in thinking that maybe Dad used to bring me some of the Buccaneers games. I was wondering, were you at some of them?
Oh yeah, I would have. Yeah, I'd often pop into the rugby club there at night.
Yeah.
So they used to run
times.
Yeah, they used to run a floodlit tournament in there in Longford as well. I often went to that. Now that'd be the 15 side where you'd have Irish development squads and that. And I always had a graw for the rugby, so
brilliant, yeah.
It was natural that I'd get drawn to that. I followed Longford Town. I used to go to watch them, all their home games on a Friday night. I think most of them used to be. So I'd go and I'd follow Leinster because it was kind of a hip thing to do, even though that wasn't the reason. It was just handy for me because Ronan lived across the road from the RDS. So we could stay overnight or do what we wanted, you know. And then the team started winning. So what else was I going to do? Leave a winning team?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I don't think no matter what you do, you'd be looked as a bandwagon supporter, you know. But
I ended up. I went to 3 Heineken Cup finals, and I went to a Heineken Cup semi-final in Bordeaux. So
can't put a price on those experiences. They're brilliant.
Absolutely not. The Bordeaux experience in the semi-final was magic, is the best way to describe it. I've never been in a sporting atmosphere or trip like it. Like, you know, it was quite an amazing experience. And then to go to the Heineken Cup final in the Millennium, that Leinster were behind something like 21-5 at half time, and they come back and won it. That was a great day out.
Yeah. Oh, I'd say that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would have gone to some of the soccer. I had done stuff I couldn't do playing Gaelic football. That's what I did.
Yeah,
I had time to do stuff. That's important too, like, you know.
Of course it is. Yeah, of course it is. You know, like, it's when you get the opportunity, you have to experience these things.
Well, the way Stan, I probably look at it is that, you know, when I left ESB, I didn't keep going back and stand in the yard every morning. Like, you just go, you leave, that's it. That the shutters come down. If somebody wants you to get involved with the underage teams or with the senior team or the junior team, they'll ask you. That's the way I always figured it.
Yeah.
So if they didn't ask me, obviously they didn't want me. So that's it. That I don't
black and white.
begrudge. It's very black and white.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
yeah.
We can't but mention you're a Leeds United fan as well. So that's
the real deal is on later on today.
They're out an action tomorrow, aren't they?
I don't know. I didn't just look at the fixtures, believe it or not. No, I didn't get around to that yet.
Yeah, it's that's good to have it back. But look, I just want to revisit. Just obviously, you're well known as a dead ball specialist, and I've had the privilege, as many others would have seen an awful lot more of it. But and there's some of these great action shots here from behind the goals and the penalty. From you talked about it before, so I'm conscious not to revisit. Obviously, we have addressed the overthinking and that barrier of it. So I want to maybe just talk a bit more about the practicality aspect of it as regards. Did you practice much?
Yes, I practice.
Did you practice on your own, or did you? I actually have another memory of Killoe training one time where you would often go off and you'd practice a few kicks maybe while the boys were finishing off a session. Was that more the routine, or was it
no
in between sessions?
No, I would always do a lot of practice on my own.
Okay.
Is the long and the short of it. Actually, that penalty there against Dublin, a lot of people said, that was a great penalty and it was a great goal and all that sort of stuff. Well, there's a few things about that. Well, first of all, it was a terrible penalty from my point of view, as in the ball went up high into the net, but I was aiming for the butt of the post. And if you look at that, that's a long way from the butt of the post.
It looks like the quality finish, though.
It's like
that's just the cameraman. That's a penalty kicker's dream. Maybe he photoshopped the ball out. Maybe it actually did hit the ball.
Yeah, well, you see, I'd scored a lot of penalties on O'Leary over the years, and he was sure I was going to go to his left. So for the one time in my life, I went the other way. That's why I missed the butt of the post.
I say, like, you strike me as someone that was, as you're approaching that ball, it was never a doubt.
Oh, no. Well, if the practice is done, I generally had this silly thing in my head that, well, first of all, as we said earlier, you really have to separate the penalty, the free, and your general play. And because penalties would be rare enough, but they often came at vital stages in the game, because a goal is worth a lot. It's worth a lot. A penalty sometimes can be worth even a little bit more, because the game comes to a standstill and the pain for the opposing team is greater, because they cannot do a thing. They cannot stop you. And that would be the way, I suppose, I would look at it. Obviously, you'd fear missing, but when the game would be on and the game started, before the game, you might think about, geez, I don't want to miss a penalty here today. But when the game was on, I would be thinking more of the pain you were going to inflict, a bit like a sniper or whatever you want, sort of a swagger to it. This is going in, he's going to regret that mistake and I'm going to punish them on the double, So, it's a great
word. Great word. It's so applicable to a sniper, because, you are, no point saying otherwise, you were lethal.
Yeah, but that's why I have a sniper sound on my phone. You may have heard it earlier.
It still sends shivers down a lad's spine if you heard it going off on the street. Evoke old memories.
Yeah, it was funny. Before some of the games with the intermediate team, when I was trying to give a team talk, and I never had my phone with me, but for some reason I forgot. So I was chatting away to the lads, talking about different things we wanted to try them to do, and the next thing the phone went off, and there was a long silence from me whether I gathered me thoughts again.
Oh, stop. A little cheeky smile too, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure.
John, your greatest sporting achievement?
Ooh.
No, I don't know how you could pick one from such a list. Like, we haven't even addressed your international rules experience, and training with that squad too. Like, it must have been unbelievable.
Yeah. To be honest, that's a kind of a loaded question.
Well, look, there's not one in particular. It could be a moment. It could be anything,
Winning the gold medal in the athletics in the community games, that's a standout memory for me.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know why, but if I've been asked that question a few times, like, but nobody would know that I did other stuff as well. So I would never
Yeah, there's
remain.
obviously something very personal behind that.
Well, it is because it's a very funny sort of a story. But I got a bad eye injury when I was young, and I was confined to bed, and the 1972 Olympics was on. And there was a fella in that Olympics called Dave Wattle, I think was his name. Wattle or Whattle. I think it was Whattle. Whattle the Trottle or something, because I would have watched him after that a little bit. There wouldn't be much athletics on television. And he was very odd because he used to hang to the back of the field, and he'd come with a late burst and he'd win by about a half an inch. That was the way he ran. He also wore a baseball cap, so you could always follow him in the field. And because I was practically blinded in one eye, he stood out on the old black and white televisions because he wore a cap. So because he always came with a late run, when we were running that race, the fella who was running with me at the front, he passed me. We finished in Pierce Park. We had to do a lap of the pitch. And just as we went into Pierce Park, in at the car park entrance, we had to go in, go down the hillside, come around and finish under the stand. And he pulled away by about 20 yards. And I thought, you're done here, boy, you're done, you know. And then I thought, this is the funny thing. I thought about lying in the bed watching Dave Wattle and how he came late. So I says, you know, just slowly give it everything, you know. And sure, I was well Killarneyed at this stage. So, but anyway, we got around the top end and the crowd raised because obviously he was faltering and I was gaining. So I thought, geez, you can do this. And I actually did it. I actually got past him in the last stride and won. So, in an odd way, that's a memory, like, you know.
Yeah, and yeah, it's and again the power of the psyche.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as I said, when you're lying in bed for 3 or 4 weeks, you're not allowed to get out of it. And well, for a while, both eyes were covered actually in the hospital. I wasn't allowed to use any sort of vision. But then going back watching, I would have still had a patch over one eye. So as I said, just watching Dave Wattle and what he done, this suddenly came into my head. You're not done here at all, just because he's 20 yards ahead of you with maybe 400, 300 to go. There's a bit left there yet, you know. So that to me, I said, that's a standout memory for me. Obviously, it means little to anybody else, you know. Sure,
That's
there'd be a
brilliant.
very small crowd at those. Well, I suppose the finals would have had a crowd, but in general, they're the sort of things you do on your own, you know. So,
That's lovely. It's refreshing. It's refreshing to hear something different too, you know, and that you know that it's different moments mean different things.
yeah, yeah. I was always very proud of that. For some, maybe the fact that I should have been beaten and you bounced back at the death or something.
Yeah, yeah.
The last minute goal type of thing.
Well, to pick that out of like the choice you've had, you know, it's incredible.
Yeah. Well, you see, I suppose the other element of it was originally they told me I should never play a contact sport because they would have been aware that if I got a belt on my right eye on that side of my face, I would be literally blind. So there was that part of it as well. I suppose that was a little bounce back in around 75 before I got back playing football properly, like with the juveniles and the minors in Killoe and that, you know. It was also something you could do without hopefully running into an ESB pole or a telegraph pole, you know. Maybe the fact that I had full eyesight meant I had more tunnel vision in some respect, you know.
That's very good, John. Brilliant. Thank you. I threw up a pair of Umbro boots here. I actually remember a pair you had years ago. I absolutely loved them. They were the black Umbro with the white tongue, and I could never get a pair of them myself over the years. But were you an Umbro man or were you a Puma King?
Oh, I ended up a Puma King.
You were Umbro, though, were you? For a while?
Oh, I did, yeah.
I think you're the reason actually I wore Umbro. I think Shearer started to wear them as well.
You should have sent me on some of the sponsorship money you got for that.
Sponsorship, I was giving it out. And then obviously, you know, amazing accolade of a National League top scorer as well. And were you aware of that at the time, or did someone bring that to your attention, or?
I'd say in the beginning you would have been, because
Yeah.
it was nearly thrown up as a part of conversation. You're only so far behind or whatever. Now, obviously, it'd be only a throwaway and jest type of thing as far as I was concerned. So I would have been aware in the first year or two, definitely, obviously.
Yeah.
I would like to think it never influenced me playing, for sure. Maybe it did. I don't know. I'd have to think more about that now, to be honest with you. But in general, no. I'd say no. I was aware, but it didn't matter. It wasn't an influence. Would that sound right?
Oh, of course, of course. God, from what I know of you, John, that certainly wasn't the case. And
it's nice to look at the list. Matt Connor was such a player. Like, if he's the only,
it's just phenomenal in names.
Yeah.
Dermot Earley, Barney Rock,
Martin McHugh.
Yeah, like Jesus.
Eugene McKenna. Yeah.
To be in,
to be in that company is good company.
Very
appreciative. And I would have known a few of them to chat as well. Like, I wouldn't say a personal friend, but more than a passing chat we'd have had after matches and that. So yeah.
And I'm sure it's no different to this day. If you ever cross paths too, you'd all.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
That's the beauty of the GAA too. When you get down, you break a few barriers and you get mixing and mingling. You get the opportunity to mix and mingle with lads, whether playing against them or training with international squads as you have.
Yeah, well, it's great to sit down in a relaxed situation and have a chat with lads. And I get the feeling that might have been going out with the game a little bit, where teams are getting their meals in the dressing room now, so they don't mix in the same hotel after. And there's always a rush for recovery now, whereas after our games, your time was your own until you went training. Probably the next night there would have been some sort of recovery session on for the individual if you wanted to do it, and I think that's lost. And I think the Railway Cup being let slide is a bit of isn't a good idea, because that was a great place to meet players. And while the games would obviously be competitive, there was a how would you say, a nice atmosphere around them. There was no animosity between players, or there shouldn't have been. Like, you were out to win something different.
You learned that. They didn't promote it enough, unfortunately. GAA, that's the be all and end all. Like, they let it sink.
Yeah. And I go back to your original question. I generally wore Puma King, but sometimes I wear the 6-studded one and a molded sole as well. For taking the freeze. I always wore a molded sole on my right foot. So. That was noticed a few times by players that were marking me, and they asked me, did I forget something? Stuff like that, get the boots mixed up or anything.
The Umbro ones were slick as well. And
they were a lovely boot, but I found them actually a little bit wide.
Okay.
Whereas the Puma were very tight. There was another boot
very narrow too.
Yeah, called the Patrick.
I remember. I do. There's a pair of them at home in the shed. Where did those jokes out of? I have a pair at home. Daddy had a pair of them.
Yeah, they were the real deal years ago.
You're joking me.
Oh yeah, they were a fantastic boot. Yeah, I loved them. But I think I only had 2 pairs in my time. But I would have had a few pairs all the time. One set for training in, say,
Yeah.
That type of thing. I don't know. I presume you'd have so many boots now.
It's crazy now, but actually that was one of the best things I ever did too, was just have a pair for training, because after a while you realise, I'm wearing good boots here and all I'm doing is running in the muck. And
that's right, yeah.
Destroying them, saving them, that's right. And you get longer out of them too, obviously. I remember those in the latter years when Daddy was playing a bit of junior there, in the latter end of his career.
Yes.
He used to just literally go into Durkin's, and that little white basket that was there, there'd be Patrick boots in it, and there'd be high-tech boots with the tongue sewed upside down on it, and
maybe even a pair of Gola boots.
Gola's right, yeah. That's just some of the young lads I used to play with underage were wearing high-tech, and high-tech was the Diodora.
That's right, yeah. They were a nice boot as well, actually.
Yeah, I always remember Keno wearing the Diodora.
That's right, yeah.
And come here, I have to ask you about the dummy solo, because rumor has it you could email a lad 2 weeks in advance, and he's still about the dummy solo, and he's still fall for it.
Well, whoever wrote that email is absolutely correct.
Well, like they
It
knew
happened.
they knew it was coming, and they were still going to buy it. What is that? Can you break that down for me?
Well, I suppose again, it's something that happened by accident. In one underage match I was playing, I was genuinely going to shoot, but at the very last, I mean the last split second, I knew I was going to be blocked. So I tried to pull the kick. And while it didn't solo back up into my hands, it done enough for me to realise that you could be on something here if you need a bit of space in a tight area to be sure 100% you were going to get your kick away. And that's probably really where it came from. Then, like everything else, you'd start working on it at home and throwing a shape that really had to convince the defender that you were actually going to kick it, or leave him in a situation where if he didn't commit to a block, you were definitely going to score anyway. So he might as well go for it, that sort of a way.
Such an art. Yeah, to perfect it.
Yeah, I suppose, as far as it became a signature thing, and it was probably, if I was playing with confidence, you might see one or two in a game at some stage. It was only just to throw
One or
somebody.
two.
Yeah. Well, the idea, I suppose, there's many different ways to beat a man. Like, you can move him or move yourself being the most obvious one. So I always took, if I could get him to shift a little bit, I was true, so that would be part of the deal on it. It was certainly never done to humiliate anybody or anything like that. It became a natural reaction, I suppose,
Yeah, and became automated too. You seem to just do it without thinking.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Absolutely. As I said, it wouldn't be premeditated that I'm going to make a complete ass out of someone out here if I can. That would not never be the way of thinking. No, that's for sure.
Cool. How would you like to be remembered from your career, John?
That I helped, I suppose that would do. That I helped the team, the players, that I did everything I could to be as good as I could. And if somebody wanted help from me, that I'd always offer it and do my best for them. And if it didn't work out, that's it. Sure, I tried. Would that be the final word?
I can 100% vouch for that. My only regret is that I didn't have you involved with me earlier in my career.
Well, that's very nice. That's very nice. Yeah, sometimes things can just slide away for no particular reason, as I said.
Yeah.
Like when you were coming through at your best, I'd be just standing on the hill and I'd be watching you and stuff like that. And it was great. I loved watching you. I love watching lots of the lads as well. Now, in fairness, but I suppose the fact that I wasn't involved in the club, Stan,
I know,
directly meant that I wouldn't be bothered hanging around dressing rooms or anything. I'd just go to the game and go home, make up my own mind and things, But I'd have to say as well, from your point of view and the lads, what was a difficult time for you getting involved with Killoe in, 2015. I would have been a bit iffy about going and getting involved, because for most of the lads, they may have heard of me, but nobody knew me. But I have to say, as in traditional, I suppose, in the GAA, the lads accepted me straight away.
Open arms.
Yeah. So before the first couple of training sessions, you'd be wondering on the way over, should I talk to somebody or should I talk to this fella or that fella? And then I thought, sure, be yourself, and sure, they'll either take you or they won't.
Oh, sure. We were just
easy
delighted
to walk away,
We were delighted to have you, even just to be around you. It was great.
Yeah, it was different. It was an enjoyable couple of years for sure.
You ready for your on the spots?
On the spots, right?
On the spots. First one, you win the ball on the 45-metre line. You're looking up. Who was that one forward that was always available?
Club or county?
Let's go both. Let's go club first.
It's Desi Barry. Killoe to be a variation in the full forward line.
Who wants it?
I suppose, funny enough, John Kyle would always be available. He'd be always running around like a mad fella.
Very busy player, John. Yeah.
Yeah, very busy player. Yeah. He'd be kicking around there someplace.
Great. Next one, the best manager you played under?
The best manager, I would have to go with Brendan Hackett, I think.
Okay. Very good.
He would have introduced.
Did he come after John Murphy?
Yes, he would have introduced stuff like getting focused and setting small goals, and yeah, he was an interesting character. Yeah, if I had to go for one, I think I'd go for him. Yeah, he had a lot of influence when I was at the right age to be influenced, I suppose. Does that sound correct?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. As my cousin Donald said, you're at an impressionable age.
That's right.
That's the way to say it.
Yeah, for sure.
John, thanks very much. You're a gentleman, and I'm very privileged to get to know you better in recent years, personally. So it's one thing I'm very grateful for, and I look forward to getting closer as the years go on with the help of God, and sharing and chatting lots of sport. And I really appreciate coming on and being so honest and being so open and telling your fascinating story. It's very, very refreshing, and you're one of the greats, to put it simply. There's no need to add anything else to it. It's as simple as that, and
Right.
you will forever be one of the greats.
Right. Thanks very much, Dan. It was a pleasure coming on. When you asked me about it originally, I had no problem saying yes. And hopefully we'll get over to Blackburn where we'd see Leeds Hamry in the near future.
be careful now. We're a dirty banana skin waiting for you now in a couple of weeks' time.
God, yeah, it's a while since we were talking about going to that match.
Oh, I know,
actually.
yeah.
You were going to go on honeymoon and something foolish like that when Blackburn were playing.
That's right. Blasphemy! How could I?
Yeah.
Need to get my priorities straight. But
that's
John,
for sure.
Thanks so much. Fair play to you.
Right.
Thanks a minute.
You still recording? You are?
No, knocking it off now.
Oh,